What up, party people? We are just waiting for my man Jim Lee from climateviewer.com. He's in the comments here, so hopefully, oh, that was at 1:52 p.m. Hopefully everything's okay. I haven't gotten any messages from him. I wanted to point you guys to the Bio-charisma podcast. I'm on all the players. If you guys could go ahead and give me a thumbs up or rate me a 5 stars or whatever, that would help me out a bunch. I announced today on Owen Benjamin's podcast, Why Didn't They Laugh, that I'm going to be having a Substack. With the Substack, it's going to be, oh, that's great. I love that. Carbon black matters. Yes, it does. We are on Substack. I'm going to be going deeper into the gravy portal with everything that I talk about in these interviews. Most of the interviews that I've done in the past, there's like tons and tons of things to elaborate on. And so on the Substack, I'm going to have essentially a sign up where, well, the Substack, my presentations are going to be different. I'm going to have a clear, transparent board. I'm going to be doing lots of drawings, things visually. So some of these things that I talk about might seem very complicated, but trust me, it's all very simple. And I'll get into things like magnetism and domes and domes of magnets, and I'll get into planes of inertia and all that good stuff, along with things of like black char matters. That's awesome. Waiting on you, bud. What do you mean? I sent him. Well, hold on. So we have a little mess up here. So let me send him the link. Invites, copy. Let's go here. Sorry about the little confusion, guys. So let's see here. Compose. James. Let me just do this. There we go. All right. So that's my bad, guys. I thought he had the link. He should be up. Just re-emailed it. So yeah, I'm going to be doing much deeper dives on the Substack, and it'll be a way that I can earn a little income. I will charge for the deeper gravy. I love this carbon black matters. This is awesome. Where is Jim at Climate Viewer? I know. Where is he? He is coming. Bowler Bear, my man. Good shout out. Yeah, we had a good time. In fact, we're going to continue the gravy stream rolling tomorrow. I cannot wait to talk about static electricity. I think static electricity should be called dynamic electricity because there's nothing static about it. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Ooh, geoengineering free Canada. What? This is gonna be fun. This could be fun tonight. I always enjoy talking with Jim. He's a fellow fire dragon. So Christopher Gardner's Zoom work. Oh, I scheduled through the wrong thing. Oops. Resent the StreamYard. Rookie mistake on my part. Sorry, Jim. I apologize. I apologize. I didn't mean to make you cry. Fire snake. Yeah, boomer. Damn Skippy. No, I am not a boomer. My Pluto is actually in it's in the Virgin. So you're only a boomer if your Pluto is actually transiting Leo. So for any of you people that would like to ever get a celestic profile, you could just ask Bowler Bear in the chat how that goes. It's a very interesting way to see the luminaries. Today, in the earlier conversation with Big Bear, I got into the full cosmology of what I think is actually relevant to us. So let me make sure. So yeah, Cypher Bear, what's going on, my friend? Good man. Yeah, so with the celestic profile, it's I don't like to call it astrology because it's not. There's Jim. Yeah, what?
Pony.
Add- What?
Fire dragons in the hills.
He's out. What's going on, my man? Sorry about that. I had way too many links going on.
Yeah, I'm sitting there staring at Zoom, like spinning around and going, okay, maybe I'm doing this wrong.
Awesome. No, it's my fault. It's my fault because I was like thinking about it and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing a lot more lives and converting those into podcasts. And I seem to get much better now. Oh, you're squirrely cute, curly Q. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing you like dip out. What's up with that?
I don't know. I got full bars on the side. Oh, double dip. It is a double dip.
Let me see what's going on with this thing.
This is happening earlier with my stream with Big Bear. So Jim, thank you for coming on to the podcast. I've been really appreciating how wonderful your definitions have been. You really hold true to actually making sure people define things correctly. We keep going out. What is this action?
I don't get it because
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm at my.
I'm sitting on fiber optic at a gigabyte per second, so like there should be no issues. I'm gonna check my firewall real quick.
Yeah, you're much more tech savvy than I am. I'm doing all this through my phone, so it could be too much data.
Maybe I could turn my camera down. If the damn thing kicked into 4K, that'd kill you.
Yeah. Turn your camera down. Nobody wants to see that 48-year-old. That 48-year-old. God.
It's set on 480p, so like that shouldn't be it.
You know what gets it on my side is if I move a lot. I gotta let go of the Italian side of my conditioning and not move.
You mean you're Jordan Peterson? You know what? You gotta talk with your hands and all.
Right, exactly. I'm not gonna, what is it? Steal the bike, Tyson it with like always, flailing my hands about. So what I was saying earlier is that what I love about you is that you really hold people to definitions. And I kind of ride the line more on the conspiratorial side of things when it comes to weather modification. And what you've been educating me on is so much of what we're actually seeing in the sky is just pollution. So could you present to the audience exactly this chemtrail phenomenon or this high atmosphere aerosol dispersant phenomenon that we see at ground level? Could you give like sort of the nuts and bolts of why it's so much more prevalent today in our consciousness than say it was 20 years ago or even 30 years ago?
Yeah. Well, we've been looking at, so by we, I have a very active Telegram group, which I just shout outs to everybody in my Telegram group. You guys are the best damn community I've ever had. And it's interesting because, you know, just throwing an idea out there, I'm like, all right, I have believed this for a very long time. Prove me wrong. And let's
Hmm.
just go at it because um confirmation bias is a bitch. And the bottom line is like there's too many people that live in an echo chamber and they really don't like admitting when they're wrong. And for me, like learning that I was wrong about a thing is like there's
Hmm.
Stella. What's up, Stella? Stella's she just everybody go follow Stella Q on YouTube. Stella is one of the admins in my Telegram chat. And her and our resident meteorologism expert Jeff just did a whether or not episode on Hurricane Helene or
Oh, wonderful.
Helene or Helen. I've heard it pronounced every damn way. I don't know at this point. But I gotta mention it like 102 in there. They're like, he just flew over Jim's house. I saw you,
Mhm.
Stella, you witty video editor. But yeah, there's so many conspiracies when it comes to weather manipulation. And I've been doing this so long that at this point, like I feel like I'm wasting a lot of time just literally like putting out fires. It's like trying to plug holes in a dam and I've got all, 10 fingers and, my thumbs in there and I'm starting to use toes at this point. So
Mhm.
at some point, you just got to kind of back away from it and go, you know what? Crazy people are going to think, crazy people going to crazy, trollers going to troll, and fear porners are going to push fear porn. Um, and I try to separate, the saying on climateviewer.com is where conspiracy meets reality. And I think that that's where, my niche is. And I'm not trying to be like Captain Popular. I don't give a damn if anybody, likes me, loves me, hates me, wants to, like burn down my YouTube channel. So at this point in my life, like, I got two beautiful daughters. I've been married 25 years. I do
Mhm.
this because I love what I do. And my reputation is worth more to me than some damn clicks or a couple, the $5-10 that YouTube will give you for freaking ads.
Mhm.
So with that being said, a lot of people don't want to hear the truth. This is one thing that I want to preface up front. Um, Carl Sagan said it best, that once you've been bamboozled, it is simply too painful to admit to yourself that you're wrong. And there are
Yes.
a lot of people who, have invested very heavily in the chemtrail conspiracy and, and that in its of itself is a slave speak, terminology. What is a chemtrail? What does it even mean to you? Because to some people it means geoengineering. To other
Mhm.
people it means depopulation. And to other
Mhm.
people it means nanobots, Morgellons, and the list goes on and on and on. So for me, it's like, well, we started out with it's aluminum and barium. So why can't we just keep it simple, stupid, and start there? And I went hunting for aluminum and barium. And where did I find it? I found it in jet exhaust. No pipes, no pumps required. Okay. And then I thought that I was like savior of the world. Look, everybody, I found all the barium and aluminum. See, look, it's right here. And I put it on the
Mhm.
web, and they're all like, no, we want pumps, we want pipes. This is not scary enough what you're saying to us. Um, so there was this like, mental block that a lot of people have. And I think that the other part of it is that it really does take a lot of, self education to really wrap your head around how atmospheric conditions work, why they why are there chemtrails one day and not the next? Why do I see two planes side by side, air quotes, and one is leaving a chemtrail and the other one's not? Once you really start to dig into that part of it and really try to understand it deeply, then you see why everybody's so screwed over on this whole thing.
Mhm.
So I'm currently hoping to work on a project with a long time, and by long time I mean 20 plus year chemtrail debunker, and with Jeff, my meteorologist friend, and then me being the half conspiratard. I'm gonna create a website just for chemtrails, similar to how I did weathermodificationhistory.com. The difference is with weathermodificationhistory.com, I already had a blog and I've been writing on it since 2012. I had a blog before that, but I was anonymous. But climateviewer.com is my blog. So I made weathermodificationhistory.com to have the entire history of weather modification, geoengineering, and space weather modification. And most people are like, space weather modification? Well, space weather is a thing. People try to modify it. They do it with things like HARP. So those are the three categories I break it down into. And interestingly enough, artificial clouds fits into all three categories. So if
hence the name, why so serious?
Yeah. Yeah. Why so serious?
Yeah.
Seriously though, people take this so serious, and I don't get it. I mean, I made a hashtag Cirrus clouds matter, and that's currently where, if you want to look at, an outdated page that I need to update, but it's going to be the bulk of what's going to form the new chemtrail website I'm going to create. It's climateviewer.com/Cirrus clouds matter, just like the title of this video. Cirrus clouds matter, all one word. And then I have a PowerPoint presentation on this, carbon black dust, the chemtrail secret to weather warfare, or some crap like that. It's at the bottom of every single page on climateviewer.com. You can download the PowerPoint, and it'll pretty much roll you through 90% of what I'm about to tell you, except for like the radio sign data and like how to understand the atmospheric stuff. So that's where Jeff comes in, and that's what's so yeah, for real. Black carbons matter. See, this is the word game. So like, you have carbon black and then you have black carbon. So this is what I was breaking down in the PowerPoint presentation. What are the difference? Why does it matter? If you're talking about the military since 1958 has been able to create cirrus clouds. For those who don't understand what a cirrus cloud are, they are high-level, thin ice clouds. They're not the white puffy ones you see. They fan out into sheets. So whether you call it a chemtrail or a contrail, once it spreads out, it is no longer either. It is now a cirrus cloud. Mm-hmm. And that's why cirrus clouds matter. So, it doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are on how they got there, whether it's pumps, pipes, or jet exhaust. You're still talking about a cloud, and that cloud is called a cirrus cloud. And if we want to be really technical about it, it's an artificial cirrus cloud, meaning man-made. So how do we make clouds? If you're the military, in 1958, Dr. Florence Van Straten, with the U.S. Navy's help, basically flew up in the air and was dumping carbon black dust out of the back of an airplane, and was able to create cirrus clouds on demand just by dumping out carbon black mixed into liquid. Then they dropped dry packages of carbon black into those same clouds and were able to make them disappear. And they said that the cost of the experiments were a whopping $5. Now, this is in 1958, but still, $5 is $5. That's pretty damn cheap.
Yes, it is.
You could, but on the airplane side, also in 1958, in the city of Palm Springs, we have like 3 different newspaper articles that cover this, and it says something to the effect, jets black darken Palm Springs. Jets block out sun, Palm Springs gripes. And in it says basically, Our city is predicated on tourism and endless sunshiny days. However, recently our skies have looked like an exuberant mob of sky riders creating vapor trails which have blocked out the sun.
Mhm.
So to people who say that chemtrails or contrails, pick your poison. I don't care what words you use. We're not going to play word Nazi tonight. Those chemtrails were in 1958, and they're documented blocking out the sun, spreading out, blocking out the sun. They asked the Air Force about it. This was December 1958. The Air Force was like, I don't know. And then we got newspaper article, which is the damnedest headline I've ever read. And we have 850 freaking newspaper articles on weathermodificationhistory.com/newspapers. And the damnedest one I ever read. Air Force gives the city of Palm Springs two choices: live with the trails or move the city of Palm Springs. And basically, the Air Force general that came to meet with the city planners, the executors, or whatever, managers, whatever the hell you want to call them, he said Palm Springs lies at the intersection of all of the Western skyways. The idea that we have highways in the sky. So because it's at the intersection of all West Coast travel, there's way more pollution in the air, creating way more clouds. So they basically said there's not much you can do about this because of where you're physically located. So to put it simply, when you're talking about jet exhaust making clouds, it's highly dependent on where you live and what the atmospheric conditions are. I'm cool with fairy dust. I call them plane farts. I mean, honestly, like I'm, sky glitter, digital clouds, fairy dust works for me. In fact, for the next 10 minutes, we will only refer to them as fairy dust from commercial planes.
Perfect.
So in 1970, the state of Illinois and New Jersey sued the airline industry for fairy dust creating, as they put it, smoke pollution of the sky. Hey, I'm looking at my timer.
There you go.
Rules are rules, right? Got to take.
They are.
This is live. That's the way we roll. So
yeah,
they basically said that plain sharts. No, that's more like that's the rain. Okay, that's the stuff you're gonna like get in your organic garden that isn't organic. Yeah, we need to actually measure plain shards. That way we know what's actually coming down in the rain. By the way, nobody has ever done that. That is a great title for the. I do need to write a book. Topher, you're going to keep me going all night just for the comment. I intentionally put it on full screen because otherwise I would be staring at the chat the entire time. So I'm trying to somewhat focus. Anyway, the city of Illinois and New Jersey sued the airline industry because their fairy dust was making what they called at the time smoke pollution of the sky. So in 1970, Illinois and New Jersey, the sun was completely blocked out so badly that the airline industry was sued by the attorney generals of those two states. And the Secretary of Transportation, John Volpe, actually came in and basically got the states to agree to settle out of court, and the nation's carriers would install what they called burner cans, new fuel injectors and combustors to reduce particulate emissions. So this is where black carbon comes in. Black carbon is like biochar. It's like when you burn something, you produce black carbon or soot. So whenever soot and black carbon are pretty synonymous. And if you're a scientist and you go reading a whole lot of peer-reviewed journal entries, you'll see carbon black and black carbon and soot being used synonymously but they're completely different.
Hmm.
So black carbon, the soot coming out of the jet exhaust, is filled with many different things. Okay. For starters, it has a lamellae, or a thin membrane of graphene on the outside. I like to think of the fairy dust as M&Ms. So the color of the M&M is the graphene.
Hmm.
Then you have the candy shell and the chocolate inside. The candy shell and most of the chocolate is soot. So it's mostly elemental carbon, and it forms in grape-like structures. So it's spherical, but it tends to connect together. So it agglomerates in what's called an aciniform structure, or a grape-like structure. This gives it a lot of surface area, and the fact that it has graphene on the outside of it makes it very magnetic. It attracts water vapor. This is what is called a cloud condensation nuclei. So,
Hmm.
or a cloud seed. So, effectively, planes, when they burn fuel, are cloud seeding, because the exhaust that they make is sticking to the water in the sky. And if there's enough water in the sky at the right temperature, then it's going to turn into a cirrus cloud. At the very
So
least, it's going to make a long chemtrail. Um, the fairy dust will make long artificial clouds. If it's
do you
the right,
mind? Do you
good,
mind?
good,
Do you mind if I interject to give context to this?
sure.
So, just so everybody understands, at the turn of the Industrial Revolution, it was very well documented, especially in England, but other areas of Europe also, that how wherever there was smoke being produced, usually through coal burning and smelting of metal, the area would be cloudy, and it was a given that the clouds would come during the industrial process. It was seen almost immediately. And then in the 80s, when the Reagan administration decided to, quote unquote, cure the acid rain problem throughout the eastern seaboard and Appalachians, they ended up putting these high stack filters on top of these power plants. And all that did was it caused that condensation nuclei that Jim is talking about. It created smaller, finer particles. It didn't actually reduce the volume of soot that was being pushed into the air. It just
Mhm.
rarefied it. And so you end up having acid rain go further and further and further away because there were lighter particles that were carried. But once again, it's always been shown in industrial areas where you have this soot that's coming from the ground, it will create a cloud cover. And it's not just because you're looking through smoke, you're looking through a cloud. The condensation nuclei, water is a dipolar molecule, and all dipolar molecules, they want to glom on. The birds of a feather flock together. They
That's
want to
right.
also glom on to another dipolar substance, which graphene is highly, highly, highly conductive carbon,
That's
dipolar
fact.
carbon. So I just wanted to give some context that this type of science was known before we had jets zooming over our head.
And to your point, for those who've never heard of the Great Smog of London,
Right.
this was a lethal smog covered the city of London for 5 days, December 5th through December 9th in 1952. It was caused by a combination of industrial pollution and a high pressure weather conditions. The smoke and fog brought London to a near standstill and resulted in thousands of deaths.
Hmm.
So this is an example of its consequences prompted Parliament to pass the Clean Air Act 4 years later, which marked the turning point in the history of environmentalism. But the London fog is one of those, really scary moments where they realize that this black carbon, as it's going into the atmosphere, mixing with water vapor, creates sulfuric acid also.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that sulfuric acid cloud is interestingly enough, I mean, that's what caused the deaths of all those people in 1952. But it was believed that the cloud formation that was caused by airplanes was directly linked to sulfuric acid to such a large extent that even like the climate models that the IPCC uses, they made the assumption that pre-industrial revolution, the sky was less cloudy. And they believed that, the sky had become more cloudy because of the industrial revolution. And I did my homework on all this, completely self-taught. I have no degree. I am not an expert. But I went and I testified at the EPA hearing on flight pollution. And I stated very clearly that this has nothing to do with sulfuric acid. It has everything to do with the metal. And by the metal, I'm not talking about Tenacious D or Pantera.
What?
I'm talking about all of the little nanoparticles or ultrafine particles that are inside the soot. So the soot starts out the condensation process. But at some point, that soot, because it's carbon, it frees itself. And the only thing that's left to what becomes the ice nucleating particle are the metals that came out of the jet exhaust. And this is confirmed by, experiments where planes flew through clouds made by planes. And they found that up to 70% of cloud condensation nuclei in Cirrus were man-made metals.
Mm-hmm.
So I testified to this. And then 2 years later, Jasper Kirkby from CERN, he did a project, an experiment called Cloud Project, Cosmics Leaving Outdoor Droplets. And in that experiment, he created a cloud using only water vapor, some bacteria from a coniferous plant like pine tree, and galactic cosmic rays. And immediately he stated that all climate change models are wrong. We got it wrong on the sulfuric acid thing. We only need 3 things to make a cloud. We need water vapor. We need something for the water to stick to, a seed, and a spark of electricity, whether that's galactic cosmic rays, whether that's pure static. In the case of jet engines, there's something called chemi-ions, which are negatively charged ions. We know how those work. They actually are an attractive force. In fact, in the weather modification industry, they actually have something called cloud ionizers that do not use chemicals at all. They only use coronal arcing and, the creation of negatively charged ions. So the ions themselves use pollution that's in the air to attract water vapor to get big enough to fall to the ground. So this is where it gets real interesting. The whole, now sulfuric acid isn't the thing. So what is the thing? And they're realizing, oh shit, we got it completely wrong. And one of my favorite quotes is like, and I haven't read this in probably 7 years, so I'll be butchering this, but I'm pretty good at this usually. He says it's pretty wonderful to think that trees are able to create their own climates. That it really gives credence to the Gaia hypothesis. And we already know this from like cloud forests. Like anybody who studied, go ahead.
I lived in a cloud
I was
forest.
going to say, take it away, brother. That was a layup.
I had a bamboo plantation in my first permaculture design course. I was essentially living on the edge of the Firestone plantation in Costa Rica, which was like pretty much the seeding plantation of all the bamboo in Central America. They brought most of the species in from Colombia and had seeded it in the late 90s. So by the time I got there, it was a mature forest. And what they taught us was that I think it's a mature bamboo stalk that's like, let's say it's the largest type of cane, could weigh up to about 500 pounds when it's full of water. So
Wow.
they're very heavy because they go up about 100 feet tall. That 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 one cane can push 1,000x the weight of water into the air. So you're talking about 50,000 gallons of water in the air from one cane of bamboo. And I would watch it because the valley I lived in was pretty unique because we were only about 3 miles from the ocean, about 5 kilometers. But the peak of the valley, the ridges, there are two ridges that were about 3,000 feet tall, but the valley went all the way down to 1,000 feet. And I'd watch every morning for 11 years, I'd watch the clouds form right over wherever the bamboo clumps were. Like some people I knew, some
Yep.
farmers I knew would have like, 1 acre of bamboo or 10 acres or 20 acres, or down there they don't use acres, they say hectares,
Yeah.
which is 2.5 acres. And you would
Thanks
see the
for
cloud.
converting. We're imperial over here still.
Yeah, an acre is 4,000 square meters, where a hectare is 10,000 square meters. So let's just say on decent plots of land, and you never needed to plant that much bamboo because it's so prolific, especially the species that were growing there. And you would just watch the clouds, like the clouds would eventually form over the hardwood trees, but always first over the bamboo, because the bamboo, we called it dinosaur straw because it's literally a long cylinder that's
Yeah.
just pumping water into the air. And because its entire outside is silica based, there was something with the silica, like the shards. It's almost like a fiberglass, like a silica fiberglass that would fall on you when you walked within it. That there was something with the way that they were made, that they were literally called a biocondenser. So if you ever wanted to bring life to a part of your farm, if you ever wanted to attract water, if you ever wanted to attract wildlife, you would just plant a couple clumps of this bamboo and let life come in, because it would, because
Wow.
it's acting, it's pulling the groundwater up to it. And unlike, like, say, like in the central plains of Texas all the way up through Oklahoma, they have a real problem with cedar trees, because the cedar will pull the groundwater up and then use it itself and not pump it so much into the sky.
Yeah.
So you have these really thirsty plants that are not biocondensers because they're not throwing up more than their weight in water to the atmosphere above. So there's certain palms, pretty much all the palms, especially the tropical palms that have like a hardwood on the outside,
Yeah.
and also bamboo. Those two species are like the ultimate biocondensers because they act as this perfect transpiration mechanism. And
Right.
you'd see it like above the peach palm plantations and above, and I got to watch it because I was like literally at 2,100 feet looking down into the valley. And even you would see it on when storms would be coming in off the ocean, you would see these plasma light flashes wherever there was great transpiration. So that goes back to like the Victor Schauberger, where he would say whenever you could see a healthy forest, there would be these flashes of light in the
Yep.
sky. And that's because as that whole thing that you're talking about, the static charge that occurs, static isn't static at all. Static is dynamic. I don't know why they call it static electricity. That really throws me off. But what occurs to get a static
Because
charge,
for the layperson that didn't get the joke there, static means stale, means standing still,
right?
and it's anything but. But go ahead.
Yeah. So what occurs is it's very easy to create a static differential when you have charged particles of the same charge racing next to each other.
Hmm.
So what occurs is like there's something called zeta potential in our blood, and that measures how healthy your blood wants to flow. And your blood will flow very well if all the red blood cells have this very strong negative charge. The stronger the negative charge, the higher your zeta potential, the higher your health. Well, they've seen when people lose the charge, those blood cells want to come together. They want to glom onto each other, and that's a low zeta potential. And then that's when you end up having all these circulatory, pulmonary circulatory problems. So what occurs when you're looking out at the rainforest or the cloud forest, you have all these bio-condensers, these palm trees and these bamboos that are just pushing tons and tons of this ionized, rarefied water into the air. Perfect conditions for static potential to condense into plasma.
And then the magic is that the trees themselves also give off bacteria, and the
Yes.
bacteria acts as the cloud condensation nuclei. And most people have never even heard of things like Pseudomonas syringae, but there are many different natural bacteria that act as cloud condensation nuclei. In fact, ocean phytoplankton, when they eat CO2 and they fart out dimethyl sulfide.
Right.
And DMS is, you know, the regulator of the entire planet's temperature, and has been for, millions of years. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been screwing that up. So that's, when I go back to all of these, topics, and I think about it from a grand scale, through deforestation, through plastic pollutions of the ocean, through artificial cloud seeding, through pesticides, which are designed to. One of the first pesticides was called frost ban, and it specifically targeted Pseudomonas syringae. The reason why is because that bacteria is an ice nucleating bacteria, and it would
Mm.
cause frost on crops. So they want to kill that because they don't want frost on crops, but it's essential for the entire water cycle. So, like in every part of the water cycle is being attacked by intentional, acts, or as they would say, inadvertent at best. But that's we're way past that. Yes, Silva genitus. I'm gonna say silver genitals. Silver
Nice.
genitals.
We got farts and silver genitals. We're doing
Fairy
good.
dust, plain farts, and silver genitals. I'm gonna rename the podcast right now.
That's
Smartest crowd
awesome.
ever. I love it. Yeah, I was gonna Google it, Stella, but like me going, all right, let me go look that one up again because it's been a moment since I've looked at that. But I replaced it with Pseudomonas syringae because I was like, screw it, let's just move on to a different bacteria to give an example. But yes, there are many different processes for creating cloud condensation nuclei. And that's what causes a cloud to be long lived, as opposed to being like the cloud forest where you have a hovering fog, which is, obviously electrically charged, but people don't want to see the grand processes. They just want to focus on, I've seen some lines over my house and the goddamn Illuminati wants to kill me. And I mean, if you turn into any of the no, let's leave the blue balls out of this. That's a whole nother topic.
Those are the blue plasma balls, bro. So we got the blue
No,
plasma balls arcing over the silver We got it going on. It's perfect.
silver genitals, cue the blue ball. No, there was somebody tweeted me this video, and it was like I think it was in Durban, and they said that they were like blue jelly balls falling from the sky. And I immediately thought of what's that stuff called? Hydrogels.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I immediately went to hydrogels, and I was like, well, I should probably look into this, but I'm busy because I got to hang out with my homeboy, my bro Ham Topher tonight. I'll put that on the back burner, and I'm gonna cover the Helene next rad debacle tomorrow night on my show at 9 p.m.
So
Um,
so I want to state something also to give context to this whole, because we're talking about There's condensation nuclei in the sky that isn't just happening from, supposed drones spraying us, or like whatever people want to say is spraying us. So what we're getting to is the point is that there's so many other things that are ground based that are being pushed up into the sky that also adds to this problem. I've had Dr. Stephanie Seneff on the pod, and she wrote this book called Toxic Legacy that talks about the world's #1 chemical. It's glyphosate. It's the chemical that's produced the most and it's sold the most at the highest profit. And we know the world's corporations, especially the chemical corporations, are all about the Benjamins. They
That's
have
right.
so much money. They will run interference, people. You have to understand, part of marketing isn't just positive marketing. A lot of marketing has to do with running interference on the truth, so it limits their liability. They love people talking about drones or demons putting lines in the sky. They
Yeah.
love that stuff
And
because
and
it
and the
takes
same is true with the airline industry. If
right.
anybody was to make up a chemtrail conspiracy, knowing that they 1958 they were complaining about it to the Air Force. 1970 they were sued for it. In 2015 they were sued again for blocking out the sun, for all of these issues. And who better who gets the most bang for their buck every time somebody's actually out there saying anything but, hey, we should look into the pollution coming from planes? It's the airline industry. So if I were the airline industry, I would hire professional comedian, infotainer, faketivists to go on and lead people astray. So it goes right back to what you say. Public relations is psychological operations, is perception management. It is all interference through mind control, words, and fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So as long as you can run interference and keep people focused on the straw man, they never actually attack, the problem. And that's why, I've been calling attention to this for so long, because I want people to focus on tangible proof as opposed to looking for fairy dust pumped from, unicorn asses, which are welded into the commercial planes. Delta Airlines has a chemtrail switch in the cockpit, for all of these purposes. Storm Fury 101, that's Dominic Marama. That's my homeboy from weathermodificationhistory.com. That's actually the guy who made all the newspaper articles.
Mhm.
Hell of a
That's
graphics
wonderful.
artist too. Um,
I like
but
his
yeah,
logo.
he's
So
pretty dope.
let me pontificate a second about glyphosate, because glyphosate's very important to understand what it does to water and what it does to plants. And just a very simple plant. So I have a few people in the chat that know a lot about gardening. When you start to kill a plant, guess what it does? It ejects. It shoots stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually put glyphosate onto a plant, or pretty much any biological organism, but let's just say the plants are more sensitive because they can't move. They can't defend themselves in the ways we know. What they start to do is they will shoot, like Jim is saying, spores. They will do whatever they can to say, species exists. I'm out of here. And it will eject things. And this is the thing, is we're seeing now, I think it's 37 years of glyphosate on the world, and it's cumulative. It's a water soluble chemical. And they found it almost acts like a homeopathic, meaning if you have water that technically doesn't even have a full molecule of the substance in it, the water itself has a memory of the glyphosate being in it. And what does the glyphosate signal? The glyphosate signals, its whole chemical composition is there to create permeability. That's how it kills plants. Well,
Okay.
that memory in it is now being distributed to all living things, and it's being pushed up into the sky. with that, we also have the electrosmog action that also changes the way water wants to act. So we can't, for those of us that are over 40 years old, we can't look up into the sky and say the sky that we're looking up through, all the things that we're seeing, it isn't the same sky because we have the cumulative action of the glyphosate and we have the cumulative action of all the microwave radiation, all the different amount of electromagnetic smog that we're actually looking through that's playing with all the water particulates. And by playing, I'm using very nice terminology.
Yeah.
It's
Changing the diffusion, the diffraction of light. It's changing
yes.
the UV radiation that reaches further down into the atmosphere. And to your point about, ground based, emissions at flight altitude, mineral dust. Think about this, just soil erosion from monoculture crops. We had climate change for real. In the last 100 years, it was called the Dust Bowl. And that Dust Bowl was caused by deforestation and monoculture crops. And that caused these massive walls of dust that would just blow across the Central Plains, the breadbasket of America. And how did we solve it? We planted 220 million trees from the Brazos River all the way to Canada along the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains to create a windbreak to stop the erosion that was happening. So interestingly enough, when they were testing cirrus clouds to see what's in them, a lot of it was actually mineral-based alumina, meaning dirt. It's literally dirt all the way up there at that altitude also. So between mold, spores, bacteria, mineral dust, erosion, and then all the plane farts and fairy dust, we have this cumulative effect that's building up. What's unique about airplanes is, though, they are constantly traversing the tropopause. So as they're flying up to, at the equator, typically the stratosphere has a height. The bottom of the stratosphere would be, and the top of the troposphere would be about 42,000 feet. At the Canadian border of the United States, the typical height would be about 38,000 feet. And then as you get closer to the poles, that height keeps getting lower. But if you look at radiosonde data, and we do this quite often, we actually saw in California one time, Jeff sent me, he's like, dude, you got to see this. The Trumpopause is at freaking 25,000 feet, like for real. So if the Trumpopause is at 25,000 feet, then that means that every single plane that is flying above 25,000 feet is in the stratosphere. This changes the residence time of the chemicals that are coming out. This also means that the chemicals that were lofted that could have reached 40,000 feet typically are now being lofted into the stratosphere. Why does this matter? Because chemicals that are in the troposphere, the troposphere is where all of our weather occurs. And that's where you breathe. That's where everything happens. So it's constantly mixing. It's constantly, it's very turbulent and chaotic. Whereas the minute you enter the stratosphere, you have an inversion in temperature. So as you go up in altitude, the dew point depression and the temperature, they tend to go like this. And then once they get up, you get up to the tropopause. If you look at a radiosonde, they immediately diverge away from each other. So the temperature is going lower, the dew point depression is going higher, and where they meet, that's called an ice supersaturated region, ISSR. If you have an ISSR and a plane flies through it, you're going to have chemtrails, you're going to have contrails. The fairy dust will turn into freaking cirrus clouds. This is called the Schmidt-Appelman criterion. You can go to windy.com, click on radio signs, watch Stella Q's channel on YouTube, and Stella and Jeff will break down how to read radio sign data. I'm special because Jeff will literally call me on the phone and give me personal tutorials. I'm a half-assed meteorologist at this point. So once the chemicals, so typically the chemicals that are ejected from, planes when they're burning their fuels, they have a residence time from around 4 to 5 days to like 2 weeks max, typically, even at 38,000 feet, because they're going to rain back onto the ground. But if they're in the stratosphere, depending on how high in the stratosphere they're on, their residence time for the same chemicals goes from 2 weeks. If you go up to 10,000 feet, 2 months to 2 years. So those chemicals gradually build up, and it gets worse. There's a special little caveat with carbon black. And I told you earlier that the carbon black, it's the metals that are in it strip away and become cirrus clouds. That's what everybody's bitching about with the chemtrails. They're seeing these ice crystal clouds, which are made primarily of metals and frozen water. But the carbon black, the black carbon, the soot, it keeps going up. And this is because it's black and it gets heated. And the sun, when heating a graphene covered piece of elemental carbon, that's called photophoretic levitation. So the Indian Space Organization found black carbon from jet exhaust at 18 kilometers into the stratosphere. That is well into the ozone layer. No plane flies that high. Unless we're talking about military planes. But the fact that there's so many, they found 10,000 black carbon particles per cubic centimeter.
Wow, that's a lot.
And when you think about the further you get away from the ground, the more area there is, by definition, that you found them at 10,000 per cubic centimeter. And we're talking about agglomerates probably in the, sub 2.5 micron size. And there's 10,000 per cubic centimeter. Oh, by the way, they're blaming all the aluminum that they're finding in the stratosphere on space junk re-entering and rocket bodies and all that. But they want to ignore the fact that all of these planes, to the tune of 150,000 per day, and it's only going up like a logarithmic chart. In 2004, there were 20-ish million flights per year. In 2019, there were 43 million flights per year. So if you really want to get down to it, what are the main causal factors of this increase in the chemtrail problem? This is going to get deep for a second. I see several factors. One, NATO changed every NATO country changed from gasoline to diesel fuel, from JP4 to JP8. It's called the single fuel concept. Started in 1998, ended in 1996. The first time chemtrails were ever talked about.
That makes no sense. You said it started in 98 and ended in 1996.
No.
You mean
it started in 1988 and it was completed by 1996.
Okay.
Around the same time, there was a gentleman who called into Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM talking about NATO is spraying us with ethylene dibromide. The very first article on the internet that used the word chemtrails was talking about JP8 jet fuel and ethylene dibromide. So it's really interesting how we started there and we've come so far, but nobody remembers. So there's that. Now, when they changed from, we still use JP8, yes, but not so much, because the vast majority of NATO, the NATO alliance countries have converted from using JP8 to, at least when we're talking about airplanes, okay, they've converted to Jet A1 plus additives. So they have, these are called STANAGs, or the NATO fuel codes. So like F40, F44. So even though they're using commercial jet fuel, Jet A1 now, they finally converted in like 2014 through 2018. They converted again. So from 1996 to 2014, they were flying on JP8, to be specific. Now, if you compare the chemical composition of the two fuels, the JP4 had about 5,000 parts per million. Yeah, but where you're talking about land-based vehicles, in the Marine Corps, and even maybe with the Apache helicopters, but yes, the idea was called the single fuel concept. So maybe you'll, Gunny Bear, maybe you know about this or not. It was called the NATO single fuel concept. The idea was to have one fuel for the battlefield, that you would have the same fuel in the planes as you did in the Humvees and the tanks. All of the things would have one fuel for the battlefield, one fuel to rule them all, Lord of the Rings style. So this is a significant event, in my opinion, because if you compare JP4 to JP8, JP4 would have 5,000 parts per billion of calcium. JP8, 31,000 parts per billion of calcium. For those who don't know that calcium is a metal, it is.
It is, yeah.
And that's it. And interestingly enough, David Keith, geoengineer, went from sulfur to titanium, A1 plus 9. How about A1, Jet A1 plus 100? Google that one, Josh. Yeah, plus 100. It's called a HITS additive, high thermal stability. It used to be JP8 plus 100. Now they have the Jet A1 plus 100 additive. Plus 100 additive is you're getting me with these. You're doing this intentionally. I know you are. You're gonna see if you can scramble my brain and throw me off. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to lean back and I'm going to close my no. So the amount of metal particulates in this dirtier fuel led to coking in the engines, and it's very similar to what you do. When you're burning biochar in a kennel, that you get this coke that builds up on the walls, and that is the agglomeration of soot inside the engine manifold itself. My father-in-law, we'll just go with that. He was a 30-year chief master sergeant in the Air Force when he retired. His specialty was fuel engine corrosion systems. Retired from Offutt Air Force Base, working on the E3 Sentries, the AWACS planes, the Globemasters, the C-17s, the big ass planes. So when I learned about this NATO single fuel concept, I called him and I asked him about it, and he confirmed everything that I was thinking. That yes, they literally had to redesign large portions of the engines because yeah and no. Barium, most of the lubricants contain a lot of barium, and yes, calcium, lithium are used in lubricating jet engines, but let's not go there yet. That's too deep in the weeds. But yeah, so we have this massive change. If you want to talk about Earth changing, think about all NATO countries simultaneously switching from one type of fuel to another that burned much more metals into the sky. So this from 1996, when I graduated high school in 1995, I remember blue skies too. And that's not to say that, what happened in 1958 with Palm Springs or Illinois, New Jersey, if you're in these heavy flight corridors, they called them vapor trails. Then they called them smoke pollution of the sky. They called it black belch. If you want to see black belch, go watch any video of a B-52 bomber taking off on the runway, and you'll see the
Hmm.
black plumes coming out of the back of the engine. That's what we're talking about here. So between that and the advent of, cheaper flights, so we've got flight numbers are going up steadily, because I've actually got charts going all the way back to the dawn of flight, all the way through the present time. This is going to be on the new website. I want to put all this data together, and I
Hmm.
want to create this grand chart that shows these things overlapping. So what I see is this: NATO countries, all same time, changed to dirty fuel. That's 1996. Then we have the increase in flights. Then we have the push to make planes fly higher, closer to the tropopause, because in order to get the price down of tickets and have more flights, you have to fly higher because you save on fuel. Then you have the invention of social media, which was, depending on what you think about it, 2000 to 2007. Okay. So that's the advent, the birth of the big, social media. And as social media starts to increase, what else increased? These. So between the increase in atmospheric buildup of pollution in the stratosphere, which is turning the sky milky white. This is the part that everybody misses. They miss the freaking forest for the trees. You're not seeing the whitening of the sky because you're so focused on the clouds. As Bruce Lee said, it's like a finger pointing the way to the moon.
Hmm.
Don't focus on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. So everybody's so focused on these clouds that they don't even notice that the entire sky is becoming whiter. And that is due to the buildup of background aerosols in the stratosphere, which are changing diffusion of light. It is changing the albedo of the atmosphere. And you can see this for yourself. If you have a good shot of the horizon, you can look at the horizon and you'll see a milky white haze. Yes,
Hmm.
universal whitening. Interestingly enough, when proposed in 1997 to geoengineer the planet by Lawrence Livermore National Labs, by Edward Teller, Lowell Wood, and Roderick Hyde, I'm going to say those names again. Edward Teller, inventor of the hydrogen bomb, Lowell Wood, known by his best friends as Dr. Evil, and Roderick Hyde, kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. These three cats got together in 1997 and they looked at the Mount Pinatubo eruption of 1991 and they said, well, damn, that cooled the planet down. It put a whole bunch of sulfur in the stratosphere. Maybe we could put a bunch of sulfur in the stratosphere and we could cool the planet down. We'll mimic volcanoes. We'll call it stratospheric aerosol injection, colloquially known as solar radiation management or geoengineering. So, yes, black, carbon black is making us white. It's crazy. Do you know how many people have reached out to me and said, is it just me, or did the sun used to be darker yellow and orange tones, even during the height at noon? And now it's always bright white.
Hmm.
So that's where we're going with this. It's a combination of many factors. And I first off, I'm gonna look at the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the number of flights flying into and above the tropopause, which are flying into the stratosphere, which by definition, according to Lowell Wood and Teller and Hyde, they are doing stratospheric aerosol injection because all of the aerosols coming out of jet engines are whitening the sky. That's exactly what they intended to do when they laid it out on paper. So that's geoengineering. Then, well, what about the clouds, Jim? Aren't they geoengineering with those two? Yes. But isn't that weather modification? Yes, because it's not clear skies today. It's clear with a chance of fairy dust and plane farts turning into cirrus clouds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's weather modification. See how it all gets really twisted really quickly? If
Sure
you
does.
go, there's a website called contrails.org. And this is Bill Gates' breakthrough energy company has made a website called contrails.org. Now, I told on them at the EPA hearing. And then I interviewed Dr. Rangasai Halthori from the FAA, Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative. They were doing biofuels for contrail control tests. So I had to, I'm going to call the guy. And he agreed to a written interview. In 2010, Ulrich Schumann, the world's leading expert on contrails, he said to the International Civil Aviation Organization, a UN body, at the Aviation and Climate Change Colloquium that blocking out the chat that he said to the colloquium on aviation and climate change, we want less warming, more cooling contrails, predictable for operational planning. This is because on 9/11, 2011, they grounded all flights for 3 days. And when they did, Patrick Menace from Langley Research Center wrote a paper talking about the regional diurnal temperature range changing dramatically. Now, what this means is that during the day, it would be a certain temperature, and at night, let's give it some numbers: 80 degrees during the day, 65 degrees at night. But during those cloudless days where there were no planes on the 3 days following the 9/11 theater show,
Mm-hmm.
the diurnal temperature range went from 80 degrees during the day to like 50 degrees at night.
Mm-hmm.
So what they realized was that these metal clouds they're making act like a blanket. And basically, you have what's called shortwave and longwave radiation. Shortwave radiation, it bounces off the top of the cloud and goes back out. That's what geoengineering's idea is to change the albedo of clouds so that when the light comes down, it bounces off the top of the cloud and it goes back into space. But what about the light that passes through it? If it then tries to radiate back into space, but the chemtrails block it, then it's acting as a blanket. So this was the hypothesis that Patrick Menace came up with, that the reason why it was warmer at night was because there were cirrus clouds that were trapping heat. Now, a whole bunch of scientists rushed out to try to disprove him. And then it happened again. In 2008, there was a volcanic eruption over Iceland, and they grounded all flights over Europe. And again, this time over the UK, they saw an E3 Sentry AWACS plane flying radar. One plane in the sky created cirrus clouds large enough to cover 3/4 of the UK by itself. And this prompted Olivier Boucher, who was head of the IPCC's Cloud Aerosol Interaction part of the book report, to say that we underestimated, the climate impact of cirrus clouds made by planes. In fact, they're 5,000 times greater radiative forcing than all of the CO2 emitted by aviation since the start of flight.
So can I pose a couple scientific things that, at least from my conditioning of what I understand, especially when it comes to carbon black in electrical potential relative to temperature differential. So what you're stating is fact. Flights have gone up. Cheap flights have gone up. As the cheap flights have gone up, there have been more pollutants that have been put in the troposphere and above the troposphere. That is undeniable. What we're talking about also is that the condensation nuclei of the graphene that's around this soot.
Yep.
Let's talk about why graphene is actually used in electronics, why graphene is used in the most like the nano architectures of every single
It's a superconductor.
it's a superconductor. Now, what does superconducting mean? It's kind of cool because in my earlier podcast today, I got into what superconduction means. It means that there's a transfer of charge with zero latency. There's no loss. There's no loss. There's no loss in time. There's no loss in charge. Okay, so we have this albedo effect.
Give them a comparison of that versus like a copper wire.
So copper, I forget how many ohms of resistance, but most of our houses are wired in copper.
Right.
Hopefully. If you live in like the third world, they'll wire things in aluminum, which has even a higher ohm. It has more resistance.
The higher the ohms, the higher the resistance, the more energy it takes, and the more energy you lose to heat.
Yeah. The biggest cartel in the world that nobody's ever spoken of and they're not allowed to speak of is platinum. Because platinum, when you rarefy it, is a superconductor. So a lot of these hypercomputers, some call them quantum computers. I hate the term quantum, but these computers that the public never sees, they're all graphene and platinum on top of silicon.
That's what I always speculated. I was like, when we get to a point where you realize that you can create an entire circuit board and the die itself, when you can literally arrange individual atoms of graphene, we're talking about 2 nanometer processes for some of the best chips on the planet. No, we're talking about individual atoms of graphene can be laid out in go ahead, you take it from there. The computing power that we're going to see in the near future when they start actually making that available to consumers is freaking insane. But go ahead.
So what I can see is occurring is the reason why you'll use a superconductor is because you don't have any energy loss. When there's no energy loss, it becomes more efficient because you're not losing things to thermal expansion. The loss, usually the resistance is converted into heat. But when I massage people and something's really moving through, it's an instant heating up of that area because that resistance now is broken and the energy can flow through, right?
That's right.
So the way you have to think about this is if the troposphere and the tropopause and then that which is above it is laced with all of these superconductive nanoparticles that water is attracted to. This is the key.
Yeah.
Water wants to glom onto it because these are dipolar molecules and birds of a feather flock together. What you're seeing is this inordinate amount of water vapor going higher and higher to the veil, to what people would quote unquote call space. This changes the entire electrical gradient of our atmosphere. And when you change the electrical gradient of the atmosphere, and what you said about 9/11 was so true, because I was down in Florida after 9/11, and when that occurred, I remember the temperature differential. The temperature differential this is the craziest thing. By putting all these superconductors up in the sky, they're essentially not allowing the electrical potential to ground. I bet you that's why there is an incredible amount of depression these days, is because it's not like 40 years ago when you'd walk outside, the ground was carrying a greater potential because I don't know, I'm a builder. I've had to work with municipals and they're finding it's harder and harder and harder to ground things out. They have to go deeper. They have to use more surface area in their conductor and their grounding wires. They have to do all these things.
We had to put, I just hooked up a mobile home and we had to put a 12-foot copper pole in the what in the hell is that? Like
For for a mobile home, like give me a break.
and we're talking
It's
it used to be like 3 feet was the minimum. Standard was like maybe 5 to 6 feet just to be extra safe. So if a lightning bolt struck or something like that, but for 12 feet in a place with a water table that's typically like 4 feet underground, are you freaking kidding me? But go ahead.
so Jim, let me tell you this. Like in Costa Rica, and this gets back to what you're talking about, the aluminum, the clay getting up really, really high in the
Mhm.
sky. Like during our dry season, all the roads there are dirt, and so the clay just goes up into the sky. And it's actually, you don't get a clear sky during the summer when there's no rain. You get the clear sky during the rainy season when it's not raining because you don't have all that clay in the sky.
Is that like the
But
red clay?
the red clay, which by the way, it's bauxite. What is bauxite?
Yeah.
It's aluminum silicate.
Yeah, and
When
we
people
have
are
that
like,
all through South Carolina. All my younger days running the dirt roads, drinking, riding in a 4x4. We would just be chemtrails of freaking dirt. Clay trails. And
yes,
a lot of people don't realize that. Like my wife's grandmother, she had Alzheimer's and she used to walk down this red clay dirt road every single day and work in a chicken house. And we now know that there's a direct link between inhaling aluminum through the nostrils
hmm
and, Alzheimer's,
yep,
neurodegenerative diseases, because it can penetrate the blood brain barrier. So most people aren't even aware that what we're talking about here with, bauxite and the amount of aluminum in the soil. So they're sending in soil samples and going, look, proof of chemtrails. And I'm like, no,
hmm
proof of aluminum that's in dirt, because that's what's in dirt. But go ahead, man.
yeah. So check
Great
this
point.
out. So what I had to do to ground things in soil that was bauxite clay, and this was given to me by the Costa Rican government. This is the way the Costa Rican government, their core of electrical engineers figured out you had to bore a hole, a 12-inch hole, down further than what you were going to actually put your pipe in, your grounding rod. And grounding rods were insufficient in their surface area, so you'd actually have to use a pipe. And this pipe had to be a non-galvanized pipe, but I forget how it was treated so it wouldn't corrode. And then they would fill it with salt. So you'd fill the pipe with salt. So you're actually creating a galvanic battery because that's the only way that they could get ground. So you tap the side of this rod. That rod's now going in this hole that you have to backfill with, check it out, calcium bentonite clay. Because calcium bentonite clay, like you said earlier, calcium is a metal. It's a more conductive metal than aluminum is because
Yeah.
aluminum is paramagnetic. Calcium is diamagnetic.
Yep.
So a diamagnetic substance will give a direction. A paramagnetic substance will not.
Yeah.
Paramagnetic substances, when you
Every
add
which
them
way
to
but
an
loose.
exactly,
For those,
they're
just pause real quick. For those who are getting lost in the weeds of what we're talking about, if you're like, you have no idea what we're talking about right now, look up the magnetic periodic table. And
nice.
it's a just to give people a frame of reference. When you look at the magnetic periodic table, it'll tell you things like paramagnetic, diamagnetic. And if you don't understand what those terms are, then just look them up, and then you'll be able to come back to this video and go, aha. And that is the fundamental tool of being able to understand all of this really complicated stuff. Anytime you get stuck on a word, immediately hit that pause button, open a new
Mhm.
tab, go figure out that word, come back so that you have the context necessary. But yeah, keep going, dude.
So what you're doing with these new grounds, and the way they told me is right now the Earth itself, and this would make sense if there's less of an electrical charge hitting the Earth. Because when you increase the amplitude of your current, let's say, it gives direction. If you decrease the amplitude of your current, then it becomes it's like a wandering signal, right? So what we're talking about is that we have this albedo effect that, like you said, it's reflecting the short wave and it's only allowing the long wave to get through. Well, that's a tremendous band of the electromagnetic,
Yeah, the
you
light
know,
spectrum.
the light spectrum that's not now charging the Earth. So the charge and the overall charge of the Earth itself, then at that point, the areas that are more paramagnetic, like the red, like, because I've been talking about this for 15 years. When I massage people in a paramagnetic environment, it's a totally different experience than when I massage people in a diamagnetic environment. I'm a polarity therapist. That's my profession. That's my day job. Is like I literally understand polarity in biological organisms. So so think about it. What this is telling me is the albedo effect is blocking the current, that extra juice, right? The
Yeah.
earth loses its ground then. So then when we're actually grounding our our structures or whatever, we have to use so much surface area. We essentially have to make an earthbound galvanic battery just so we can tap into ground because ground is so much further away. Dude, this is why people are getting so depressed. This has everything to do with the lower light levels, the SAD, the seasonal affect disorder, and this lower actual ground condition.
Yeah. So there's also these things called Steve. Have you heard of that? The strong thermal emissions velocity enhancement is an atmospheric optical phenomena that appears as a purple or green ribbon of light ribbon of light in the night sky. Um, Named in 2016 by Aurora watchers in Alberta, Canada. So between Steve, elves, and
Mm-hmm.
sprites, we have these upward lightning phenomena, which
Mm-hmm.
used to be extremely rare, and they're becoming more and more common, which lends further credence to what we're talking about here, that there's a throwing off of the electrical balance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and on the other point, we know that negatively charged ions, are beneficial to human health,
Yes.
whereas a positively charged atmosphere is gonna cause all kinds of neurological problems. So we have this compounding effect of toxic nanoparticles. And to give you some context, this is absolutely mind-boggling. And I didn't learn this till just less than a year ago because I couldn't ever get any actual numbers on this. But when you have they had an Airbus A320 and they were testing it to see how many nanoparticles it was putting out. At 80% thrust, it was putting out 100 quadrillion ultrafine particles per second. That's 100 with 17 zeros behind it per second. So then you think about that and you try to quantify 40 plus million flights per year. How many hours flown? And we're talking about a 100 comma 17 freaking zeros behind it. That's an asterisk. They don't even have a name for a number that big. So we're talking about an unbelievable amount of nanoparticles that are being lofted into the sky, which are not only changing the light spectrum, they're changing the electrical properties of the atmosphere. They're making the sky milky, hazy white. And nobody's talking about any of this. The only thing they're talking about is the goddamn The fucking Illuminati cabal is out there, and they're trying to shut Alex Jones down, but they never will because the dog's got you can take the fight out of the dog, but you can't take the dog out of the fight. And I'm gonna be back to talk about them with their Illuminati chemtrails, making all the frogs gay, and they're out there right now. This Topher Gardner and this Jim Lee talking about their stupid pollution bullshit. They're a bunch of shills. Everybody in the audience, you know they're shills. Alex Jones reporting from the battle lines of the fear porn capital of the internet, Infowars.com. And I'm out. And that
was awesome.
And that's all
Bravo.
people ever get.
Bravo.
Thank you. That's all people ever get, dude. It's, that, or it's freaking Dane Wigington droning on. The entire biosphere is collapsing, and we can see this every single day. Well, how can you just sit there in your home, scratching your balls, not caring about the destruction of the entire biosphere? And I'm like, I hear these dudes, I hear the tone, I hear the intention, the manipulation, the fear porn that they put out. And then I'm absolutely disgusted by these karma fucking vampires that take advantage of things like this hurricane and the flooding in Asheville, and all, not just Asheville. Everybody's focused on North Carolina, but everybody who got flood damage.
By the way, how did you fare in South Carolina? Did you do all right?
Yeah, it was perfectly fine because it was all a fucking lie. And that's what Jeff and I was gonna jump on it, but Jeff was like, "No, me and Stella are doing a video like today on it." He called me earlier today, and he's like, "In about an hour and a half, we're gonna record." I was like, "Cool, y'all make the damn video so I don't have to, and I'll just promote it." But he's looking at the wind meters. They're calling it a Category 4 hurricane. It did not even register as a Category 1. It was less than a Category 1 before it made landfall. It was all a fucking lie, dude. Like he's bringing up wind meters. They're called anemometers. He's showing what the sustained winds are versus the gust. He's got the chart up for what denotes a Category 1 through 5 hurricane or a tropical storm or a tropical depression. No, it was a tropical storm. So when it came through Sumter, I slept through it, bro. Like it came by so fast. I woke up in the morning and I took a photo, and literally, like, I had some plastic lawn chairs in the backyard, and one was moved like 5 feet and upside down. The other one was still standing up, and there was leaves everywhere and a couple freaking branches down. So it was a big nothing burger for where I live in Sumter, South Carolina. But the lie that was propagated by all of the karma vampires out there that are making money on their fear porn, talking about how NEXRAD radars steered a hurricane. Let me put this into context for you retards. A NEXRAD radar puts out about 1,300 watts. Now, it's true that the klystron that powers a Doppler radar is 750,000 watts peak, but you got to go peak versus time that it's off and on. That generates what's called an RMS power, or it's persistent power. What's called its regular power is 1,300 watts. Riddle me this, dumbasses of the internet who believe this NEXRAD hoax. So you're telling me that, let's just pretend it isn't 1,300 watts. I'll throw that in the ocean, even though it's true. Let's say it's 750,000 watts. Topher, when I tell you that a hurricane has I could go into joules, but we'll keep it simple. We'll measure it in TNT. 100 kilotons of TNT per second of power in a hurricane. You're out of your fucking gourd. And to make matters worse, Eglin Air Force Base has what's called an ANFPS 85. It is one of the world's most powerful radars on the planet. So while Into Thin Air and Dane Wigington from Geoengineering Watch are talking about NEXRAD beams that they saw, which are actually radio frequency interference lines, because they're always on and they're always spinning. They're not pointed in one direction, dumbass. Otherwise, You wouldn't be able to see the rain around it. That's how you can see the rain.
Mm-hmm.
So Eglin Air Force Base is right there where the thing made landfall. And by the way, that radar is 32 million watts. 32 million watts. For context, morons of the internet, HARP in Gacona, Alaska, the ionospheric heater that everybody thinks is a cyber, an electromagnetic weapon of doom, is 3.6 million watts with an effective radiated power of 5 billion watts. So it's watts in times decibel gain, that's how the efficiency of the antenna, equals effective radiated power. So 3.6 million watts is a 5 billion watts effective radiated power. What do you think the effective radiated power of a ANFPS military grade missile defense radar at Eglin Air Force Base that has 32 million watts going into it is? It's astronomically larger than HARP,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't affect the weather either. Why? Because the fucking sun is 1,340 watts per square meter at the ionosphere's level and 432 watts per square meter at the ground level. And you don't understand conductivity, power density, or any of these things. You don't understand the strength of these storms. So there's a whole lot of people out there claiming a whole lot of dumb shit. And that I just think that, the gradual erosion of intellect, curiosity, and the addiction to fear is what's driving 90% of the narrative out there. And I take it personally because there are real people who died from this storm because of flooding. I lived through Hurricane Hugo, motherfuckers. And I take it personally as a resident of South Carolina who has lived, through the worst, has dodged many bullets. And every time we kind of hold our breath and go, hope this one isn't going to be the one. Because 1989 was a bitch for me. I mean, it lasted a year of just nothing but cleanup. So I'm praying for everybody up in North Carolina, and I'm praying for you, fear porn pushing vampires of the internet, that your soul is saved, that somehow you don't end up in hell for all the evil that you're doing right now, scaring the shit out of people and taking advantage of people who have been put in this bad situation just to make a buck. That, in my opinion, that is the scummiest fucking thing you could do. So that's why I take my job seriously. My job isn't this. I don't do this for money. I don't do this for fame or popularity. It'd be a hell of a lot more popular if I just went, yeah, man, next rides are controlling everything. And I can tell you exactly how. And then, put on my Alex Jones voice and talk like this for the rest of the evening and get real scary because I know a lot of people at the CIA and they tell me everything. Dude, it's so fucking predictable. Like, can we all grow up at this point? Because while we started with carbon black dust, and we're talking about military applications, yes, military applications are still there. We have Dr. Arnold A. Barnes Jr., 1997, in front of an Army Air Force joint meeting called Weather Modification Test Technology Symposium 97. And he has 2 slides in his PowerPoint available on weathermodificationhistory.com where he says we can increase precipitation, we can cause drought, we can increase or suppress contrails / Cirrus, all using carbon black dust. We can steer hurricanes with carbon black dust. So the interesting part about the creating cirrus clouds with carbon black dust was that for the first time ever that I ever heard it admitted, Arnold Barnes Jr. from the United States Air Force Hanscom Air Force Base Phillips Laboratory said, why? Why would the military want to create cirrus clouds? To block out spy satellites in space and to increase nighttime operations. Think about this. During Operation Desert Storm, the Iraqi Republican Guard, they're all out there. They're like, oh, Iraqi Republican Guard, most feared people in the world. They got Russian T-80 tanks. Ooh. Well, guess what? You know what they didn't have? Fucking night vision. So if you go and you already know that you're going to have no full moon, you're going to have a new moon, and then it's already dark, and then you make sure that you make a cloud layer over the battlefield, you pretty much block out all light sources whatsoever. You can hold your fucking hand out in front of you and you can't even see it. But we have night vision, technological advantage. This is an example of weather warfare and how they use carbon black, which is manufactured, which is like, if you get good high grade carbon black, it's like 90 to 99% elemental carbon. Unlike black carbon, it is also dielectric. You know what I'm
diamagnetic.
About. Yeah.
Yep.
And diamagnetic. So it has special properties because it's engineered. It's usually its base fuel is usually some form of hydrocarbon, as opposed to being, you know, pyrolyzed wood in the case of biochar. You know, let me redneck that down. Burning wood in the campfire. You know,
no,
like
but
Boy Scouts.
So let me clarify for you, just because you're very specific, and I want you to be as educated in this as possible. What creates, in our experiments the last 6 years, where we've actually been able to measure how diamagnetic something is, you'll appreciate this. The faster you convert a hydrocarbon, and we could say, you know, any biomass has a hydrocarbon in it. The faster you convert it in an oxygenless environment, the higher the diamagnetic charge will be.
Yeah.
So it's specific. If it takes a long time for something to oxidate,
I learned this. I learned this right before coming on the show. Positive temperature coefficient, or the negative temperature coefficient, which affects the I can't even say it, resistivity. So as the negative temperature coefficient lowers, the resistivity decreases.
Yes, that's exactly it.
I just learned the actual terms. I was like, hey, grok, check me out. I'm gonna bring up grok on X because it's great. You know, AI is wonderful. Like, if you want, I was like, give me all of the electrical properties of carbon black versus black carbon, because I know this is going to come up and I better have it memorized.
So the cool thing about diamagnetic materials is that we get back to the zeta potential that we were talking about earlier. If you wanted to create a self-suspending colloid, because somebody in the chat asked, what is a colloid? A colloid is whenever you have a medium that has suspended particles in it. So let's say there's a net, you know, negative charge on the ground, and there's a net positive charge up in the sky, and we have all these different particulates that have a dielectric and a diamagnetic charge component to them, and they are negatively ionized. They would resist touching the ground, and they would go towards the positive part of the pole, right? That would, in a way, create this albedo effect. Is just another way of saying that we have a suspension or a colloid of nanoparticulates. I don't know if they're nano, but particulates, let's just say pollution, that carries an electrical charge. That would actually act in a way as an electrolyte, as a battery. Like the literal sky itself, this albedo, this whitening that we see, would be holding a charge potential that would constantly be growing. You know how many military applications that is? If you had let's say 1 cubic mile of atmosphere that had this charge potential in it, what you could actually do, like that's infinitesimal amount of energy. You're not measuring that in TNT.
Right.
You like this. I think this is. It sounds like, because I don't want people out there to say, "Oh, well, we're talking about pollution and a lot of ground-based stuff that's causing this, and airlines going with cheaper fuel and all that." And there are some very bright people on the other side of the aisle that know, wait a minute, if this dipshit that just like burns wood, as Jim would say, in his backyard making charcoal, even though I take offense to that,
No, no, no.
I make,
You're pyrolyzing in a pressurized environment.
yes.
There's a big damn difference.
So if somebody like me can figure this out as a backyard gardener, dude, there are some very bright people that are like, oh my goodness. Well, we know every meter that we go up, we gain 100 volts in potential. So, the sky goes up as far as, whatever. And now we have this colloid of pollution up there that's suspending a charge. Dude.
Right there, pause. Have you heard of a thunderquake?
No.
So there's this new phenomena of mega lightning bolts. And it actually, some of these lightning bolts are, so if you look them up, thunderquake, they're actually measuring on the Richter scale. The lightning they're super lightning. And it goes to just to prove what we're talking about is real. That the changes that we're seeing in the atmosphere, they're not natural. It is climate change, but who are the climate changers? It's not CO2. We're not talking about CO2 here. We're talking about everything but that, because our climate is changing and it's intentional. And they understand not only that this is a mechanism to depopulate. Let's be real. I mean, at the very end of the day, you can spin it however you want. This is not fear porn. Putting 100 quadrillion ultrafine particles, meaning nanoparticles, anything sub PM 2.5 micron. So that's what PM 2.5 means, particulate matter of a 2.5 micron or small or larger. We're talking smaller than that, because that's 2,500 nanometers. So anyway, all these nanoparticles building up in the atmosphere, building up all this charge. Well, now let me introduce another monkey wrench. They've now come up with these things called laser lightning rods.
I've seen this.
So at the University of Florida, they would do what's called tethered lightning. And they launch a rocket with a wire behind it into a storm cloud, and then watch the lightning ride down the wire to the ground. And then they realize electricity follows the path of least resistance. So if you create an ionized channel in the sky, the lightning will arc over to it and then straight down the laser beam. Now, thinking like Dr. Evil, I see the Boeing YAL, airborne laser, and I'm thinking, if I had a high-powered laser and I got above the thundercloud,
right,
and I pointed it at the ground,
oh, dude, and then you have every way of deferring liability. You could just say, lightning struck there, because guess what? Not all lasers are in the visible light spectrum.
That's right.
You could use something like you and I talked about in Tinfoil Hat, where the blue roofs, that whole thing. Well, they probably just used some sort of blue light laser that's invisible to the human eye, marked certain areas. The onlookers down low would see fires started by lightning. But that lightning, I'm sorry, like my friends in Paradise, California, what they described to me was like the lightning that was hitting and the explosions of the transformers was in succession. I lived in the lightning capital of the world, Broward County, Florida, and I grew up with natural lightning, and it doesn't happen that way. Like you get a lot of lightning over there, and then over there, and then over there. A
And you get
frontal
the dry
boundary,
lightning too. Where,
yeah, and then you,
for those who've never experienced it, this is literally like cloud to cloud lightning. It never actually
yeah,
strikes the ground, and it's the weirdest shit ever unless you live in the South and you're used to it. And it's actually, have you noticed that it's decreased? I don't know about where you're at, but in South Carolina, we used to have like a regular thing where every evening as the sun was going down, the clouds would start to thicken, then there would be the thunder, and at the first crack of thunder you heard, that would shake all the rain loose, and the rain would fall, and it would rain in the evening, and the next day it would be perfectly beautiful again. That was my whole damn childhood. That whole cycle has been disrupted. And when you think about the potential, perfect word for this, the potential to use this as a weapon, the only downside of this, and I'm going to put a strong caveat on this, is with all of the webcams and all of the, because they've got streaming webcams like FAA cams and people, like street cams and all that sort of stuff, security cameras. It should be like blatantly obvious if somebody's laser channeling a lightning bolt, because it will be straight as an arrow. Except they had this thing called Terra Mobile, and it was a mobile terawatt femtosecond laser. So a femtosecond is like way quicker than a nanosecond. But how long do you actually need to create an artificially charged, tract of air in order to get that discharge to occur? So I don't know whether, let's be real, none of us know how advanced the technology is. But theoretically, this is all very, very possible. And they've already demonstrated that they are using lasers to protect critical infrastructure from thunderstorms by creating laser lightning rods. This is documented on weathermodificationhistory.com. You can go look that up, or you can just, ask your favorite AI chat bot, or however you search the internet nowadays. I don't say the G word. But look up laser lightning rods and then realize that the reverse is true. That if you were to fire them from above with all of this charged energy that we have floating in the atmosphere today, with the fact that we are going into a grand solar minimum, which means that we're going to have a weakened ionosphere, which means the shields of the Starship Enterprise that we call Earth are going to be down, which means more deeper galactic cosmic ray penetration into the atmosphere, which means more highly charged particles, which we're putting up there from all the pollution, and or the CIA operations that are going on behind our back that none of us would be privy to. So I look at it like this: military, yes. Secret programs, yes. But 95% of the planes I've tracked personally, I can look at the atmospheric conditions. I can track the flight either on flight radar or globe.adsb exchange. And then I can look at the radiosonde data and go, yeah, that should have happened. Or on days where there are no contrails turning into cirrus clouds, I can go, yeah, they shouldn't be making them today because there's not enough water vapor available at the right temperature, at the right height. So when you can do this to the point where we're trolling people in Tennessee, because Tennessee came out with a chemtrail ban. They banned geoengineering in Tennessee. And we can literally go on Twitter, follow me at Climate Viewer on X. I tried to find your X. You're not on X, dude?
No,
because you're not on X. Like, it surprised me. I tried to find your profile. It's the only social media now, just in case you didn't get the memo. It's the only one that actually works. So we're trolling guys in Tennessee by saying the chemtrail operations will not be happening on Tuesday or Wednesday, but by Thursday we will resume spraying you like bugs. You've been warned. Hashtag Illuminati. And they're like, what the fuck? How did you predict when the chemtrails were going to come back? It's like magic, like prestidigitation, man. How are you doing this? We're doing this because we can look at the atmospheric conditions, and because since World War II, using the Schmidt-Appelman criterion and looking at radiosonde data, you can predict within a 95% certainty whether either exhaust-based or aerodynamic contrails will occur. And of course, a lot of people go, what about the on-off chemtrails, Jim? Well, guess what? Those water bodies in the sky, they're not perfect either. Sometimes they're in little farts, and sometimes they're affected by Lee waves. Oh, by the way, that's my last name. What's a Lee wave, you might be asking? That's a gravity wave. So you got a wave traveling like this and this. All right. So you got an upward force and a downward force. You got a heating and a cooling, which would cause a cloud to be here, none here, and then a cloud to be here and none here. And that's how we get roll clouds, canal clouds, all of these things. If people don't understand the atmosphere for shit, and they just see something weird and they immediately go, it's the government, it's the Illuminati, it's they TM, as we say in our Telegram chat. It's just officially they with the little trademark logo. Because
I have a question for you about finances, because I know that pretty much from an airline perspective, they were all going under after 9/11. Then there was I forget what the federal funding statute was, but pretty much all flights became subsidized by the US government. I don't know if it's international flights also, but like essentially domestic flights. Because when I'd fly from Florida to Michigan in college, like my flights were more expensive in the mid 90s, than like in the mid teens, right? The 2000 teens, right? It made no sense. Like, how with inflation has the price of flights went down. It's the same reason why a Tesla doesn't cost $300,000, because the government pays for 2/3 of it. Good on you, Elon Musk. That's good negotiating. So the flights that everybody takes are being subsidized. So what I want to know, just on a practical financial level, what incentivized the US government to subsidize this massive doubling uptick in flights?
Well, do you want the conspiracy answer? Or do you
Yes.
want because I have maintained since the get-go that if I were wanting to geoengineer the planet, and just think about the timing of all of this, 1996 was when Owning the Weather in 2025 was published by the U.S. Air Force Academy. Right. 1996 was the completion of the single fuel concept, changing all NATO flights to this dirty fuel filled with calcium, aluminum, nickel, lead, copper, vanadium, molybdenum, the list goes on. Isn't it a coincidence that the next year in 1997, to a planetary emergencies council, which I didn't even know that was a thing, it was in Sicily, Edward Teller Lowell and Roderick Hyde came up with the idea for geoengineering and announced it to the entire world. Isn't it coincidental that also in 1997 was the stratospheric Welsbach seeding patent on geoengineering that happened? There are so many coincidences that occur between 1995 and 1997 that I could literally do the next 20 minutes just on those. And with enough coincidences, you have to say there's enough circumstantial evidence at this point to put somebody in an electric chair. With enough circumstantial evidence, you can find a person guilty of murder and fry their ass to death. And at this point, the circumstantial evidence is that this is not accidental geoengineering. This is intentional. So we're going to ride this one back to where we're going to circle back Saki to where we were talking about earlier with Bill Gates and his contrails.org. So they've now come up with this idea called contrail avoidance. And it goes like this. We're going to make clouds during the day and none during the night. Because during the day, they block incoming shortwave radiation. At night, they trap outgoing long-wave radiation. So not only are we going to avoid making contrails that turn into cirrus clouds in case they would linger into the nighttime. So during the day, cool, but you need to cut it off right about the time it's going to hit nighttime. You want to avoid ice supersaturated regions. You want to use real-time, atmospheric data plugged into artificial intelligence. Google AI is working with American Airlines on doing contrail avoidance. So we're going to give the pilots a heads up and tell them, here's your carbon footprint for the day. These are the carbon taxes that the airline's going to incur if they don't do this. But if you do it, airlines, we're going to give you carbon offsets and carbon credits because the clouds you make cool the planet. As long as you're not making them at night, then you're actually part of the solution. We'll ignore all your CO2 emissions. We'll just focus on the fact that you're a net benefit to the planet. So if you look at this and then you look at what came out of the Biden administration's solar radiation modification report, which everybody who's gone to these states and tried to get a law passed banning geoengineering, they hold up the little Biden administration paper like, you fucking idiots didn't even read the paper. If you read the paper, you'd realize, like in the executive summary at the very beginning of it, it mentions three things: solar radiation modification, stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening. And the third one you missed was called cirrus cloud thinning, CCT. Nobody on any YouTube channel ever has talked about this, except me. Like, I've been talking about it since 2015 when Trude Storyedmo mentioned it at the weather modification conference. Because I was like, aha, I see what you did there. Mm-hmm. Because when Ulrich Schumann said less warming, more cooling contrails predictable for operational planning, he created something called the Contrail Cirrus Prediction Tool back in 2010. It was a software program to predict when contrails would form based on the Appelman-Schmidt criterion, using radio sound data, the stuff that we do manually. Like, people come into our room and they're like, chemtrails. And we're like, when was that recorded? And where was it recorded? And then we go get their flight. We look at the atmospheric data and we like, contrails. You're dumbass. And they're like, two flights side by side. This one's making one, this one's not. All right, when and where was it? Here. Well, that one was actually 7,000 feet higher than the other one, and that's why that one was making clouds and this one wasn't. It wasn't in the ice supersaturated region. So when I talked to Dr. Angus I. Halthori, I asked him what Ulrich Schumann meant by that. He said, we want to create more contrail-induced cirrus clouds during the day and none during the night. I went on Del Bigtree's The High Wire, and I talked about this plan to hijack the contrails and create them on demand to cool the planet. When I got done with the interview and it was broadcast, a guy joined my Telegram chat and he's like, yo, Jim, you're going to freak out when you see this. And it was a 2023 report from the Royal Aeronautical Society, which was called the Greener by Design's Contrail Avoidance Group. And they had two slides. One said warming contrails, and it shows the plane going up and then avoiding the ice supersaturated region, contrail avoidance. The other one said cooling contrails. And it literally shows the plane go up and intentionally flying into the ice supersaturated regions to create cooling contrails. And then they made the statement that I never thought I would ever hear come out of a scientist's mouth, admitting the quiet part out loud. 50% of the group at the Contrail avoidance group meeting said that we should intentionally fly into ice supersaturated regions to create cooling contrails, even though that would be considered geoengineering. So when you go to contrails.org and you see Bill Gates has Breakthrough Energy create this website, because I've been telling everybody their dirty laundry for over 10 years now, at least. If you go into it and you look at Breakthrough Energy, who's the chief scientist at Breakthrough Energy? Ken Caldera, one of the top geoengineers on the planet. So it gets murkier. You go into the actual software, they have a map. So if you go to contrails.org, they have a map, and it says on the map, not to my surprise, cooling contrails, warming contrails, blue, red. So you can actually see these blue and red contrails, which ones are cooling, which ones are warming. And then they have their source code, which is on GitHub. Now, for those that don't know, I'm a programmer. So I went through their source code. And in it, it mentions participation of Google AI, Gemini, and American Airlines, several other things. And then I get to the actual prediction part of the software, and it says, credit Ulrich Schumann Contrail Cirrus prediction tool. Bitch, I've been right since 2010. I've been right since 2010. Whole internet, I just want to say right now, for everybody listening at home, the no-no square. Suck it. Right there in the no-no square. Because it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that they want to use pollution as a geoengineering solution. They are using these planes, making these clouds to cool the planet during the day. And then if they cannot avoid making contrails that turn into cirrus clouds at night, they're going to use a geoengineering technique called cirrus cloud thinning, where they spray things like bismuth triiodide to melt those ice clouds away. You cannot make this shit up. And you could verify everything I'm telling you right now. If you go to climateviewer.substack.com, I've already written all the notes for you. So you can go verify it yourself. So for me, yes, I still recognize that the CIA was involved in weather warfare in Vietnam. The CIA was involved in there was Operation Popeye. The CIA was involved in creating droughts in Cuba to kill Castro's sugar crops, and was involved in Project Storm Fury to steer hurricanes into Cuba because Castro. So the CIA has a long history of weather warfare. Weather warfare was banned in 1978, but it was a piss poor ban and had no teeth attached to it. And there's no way to catch anybody doing weather warfare. Then, interestingly enough, the CIA funds a National Academy of Sciences report called Climate Intervention. They put like $630,000 into the research pool for this thing. And it goes like this. We called it geoengineering. And geoengineering, geo means earth, but we're talking about climate. Let's call it climate engineering. But climate engineering still got a problem. It's got that word engineering in it. Engineering is bad. Why? Because cars break down. We don't want to break the climate. So let's not call it climate engineering. How about we call it fucking climate intervention? So now you have these three terms. And if you go to Google Scholar, you'll realize that all three terms are being used simultaneously, because some people are with the new gig. And to be fair, I was interviewing Jim Fleming. Let me grab this real quick. James Roger Fleming wrote the book Fixing the Sky, the checkered history of weather and climate control, James Roger Fleming. So I actually interviewed him because, he's kind of a hero of mine, and we have the same logo. Like this is from the 1954 Collier's magazine. So we use this same logo on weathermodificationhistory.com. And he's like, you used most of my book for your freaking timeline. And then you even used the cover as your logo. And I said, to be fair, Dr. Fleming, you used the cover of the 1954 Collier's magazine as the cover of your book. We used that. And he wrote me back in an email, touche. So then I finally got to meet the guy, and I had been saying for the longest time the CIA was behind this term climate intervention. And we're in the middle of the fucking interview, and you cannot make this up. It's on climateviewer.com/tags/AMS 2018 if anybody wants to see the interview. Jim Fleming looks at me and he's like, and just so you know, Jim, I came up with that term. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. I was wrong. But he was there as, a historian, an atmospheric scientist. He is the chief historian that the governments go to when they want to talk about it. Everybody else comes to me. So my job is much cooler, pays much less. But at the same time, the idea that the CIA put money into the funding of this climate intervention studies, then the CIA, which I call the Climate Intelligence Agency, they actually had a climate office, which is interesting. And then they closed that climate office and they said that they were doing work somewhere else. And then John Brennan went in front of the Council on Foreign Relations and started talking about stratospheric aerosol ejection is kind of cool. In fact, it gives me a boner. When I think about it, I get a boner. And I think that, we should look into it. That's all I'm saying. Enough said. So the CIA's history of fucking with the weather to screw with other countries is undeniable. The CIA went to a geoengineer named Alan Robach, Dr. Alan Robach, and asked him if somebody was controlling the climate over America, would we know it? And Dr. Alan Robach, not being an idiot, said, at the same time, I felt like the CIA guys were asking me if we were controlling the climate over another country, would they know it? Well, it turns out that's exactly what Iran has been claiming since 2010, when President
Ahmadinejad.
What's his first damn name? I'm having a brain fart. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I got it together. My feces are consolidated. We've moved past fairy dust to pronouncing foreign dignitaries. Anyway, so President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in 2010 restated it in 2011 and 2012. European nations are stealing Iran's rain. 2018, a brigadier general from the Iranian army said Israel and other countries are stealing Iran's clouds. In 2023, they were even more specific and said the United Arab Emirates and Israel are stealing our rain and clouds. And what did we see happen to the UAE with the floods there? That's part of the United Arab Emirates Rainfall Enhancement Program, where they put out a bounty for people to try anything and everything to make the weather change. If you can make it rain in the desert, those Saudi dudes, those Arabs, they gonna make it rain on you with their Arab money. I love it. I just made two rap references in one. I'm thinking Busta Rhymes, Arab money, and make it rain on them. Yeah, I'll make it rain on them hoes. I'll make it rain on them. Anyway, you get it. So if you're already modifying the weather with lasers, with cloud ionizers, with titanium iodide, not silver iodide. That's what they like in the UAE is titanium iodide. And then you got Linda Zhao from Khalifa University talking about using nanoparticles of graphene oxide and silica oxides to do cloud seeding. You have all of this going on simultaneously from planes, drones, lasers, ground-based ionizers, and nanotechnology being deployed in the UAE. And Iran's pretty pissed off about it. You got these CIA clowns over here talking about geoengineering gives me a boner. I can't help but say it. I'm saying in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. Kind of like how Biden said that thing about, well, son of a bitch, they fired him. It's funny what people say in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's not going to make its way out to the public. So I hold out the possibility that if anybody is the they that you're looking for, I would start there, because the CIA has its own airline. If you didn't know that, go look it up. And they have a very long history of weather warfare. And geoengineering is the ultimate in weather warfare because it mimics volcanoes and it changes rainfall patterns worldwide. What's interesting about everything that we've talked about tonight is that everything that was predicted in what's called the Geoengineering Model Intercomparison Project, GeoMIP, and the Integrated Assessment of Geoengineering Proposals, IAGP, all of them pretty much coincide with what the natural analog is volcanoes. During large volcanic eruptions or large geoengineering deployments, the northern hemisphere tends to get wetter and the southern hemisphere gets drier. A good friend of mine, David Devine, he's at Adapt 2030 on YouTube, on several other platforms. David Devine and I had a conversation the other day, and we were talking about his recent videos where he's tracking these biblical floods that keep happening. Most people are unaware that North Carolina just went through a 1,000-year flood in the past month, right before this, Hurricane Helene, came through, or Helen.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so it was a tropical storm that literally appeared out of nowhere. And I'd have to pull up the exact date. Go check out David Devine's YouTube channel, and you'll see what I'm talking about because he has it all recorded right there. But basically, there was no warnings from the National Weather Service. Nobody had it on their, tropical storm, warnings. It just, in under 24 hours, appeared off the coast of North Carolina and then dropped what they had their own 1,000-year flood. We had our 1,000-year flood. It was either Dorian or Joaquin, the hurricane that stopped for 3 days off the coast of Florida, and an atmospheric river just reached out, and they called it the fire hose or atmospheric river that drenched everything from Florida up to South Carolina. Well, it was aimed at my house. We got almost 23 inches of rain in one day. It was absolutely insane. A similar event just happened right before this hurricane. So the groundwater was already, drenched before the hurricane came. And the hurricane was largely driven by a low pressure system that was west of the Appalachian Mountains. And the rainfall was so bad up there because of orographic lifting, because basically the Appalachian Mountains, as the water races up a mountain, which is called orographic lift, it's rapidly cooled, condensates, and rains out. So basically, if you think about it, like the hurricane's coming across, and basically it's riding up this mountain and it's getting sheared off, and all of that rain is coming down because typically you wouldn't have a high pressure ridge that's right off the East Coast. So it's high pressure on to the east of the North Carolina. It's low pressure on the west side of the Appalachians. And that's what basically caused it. If you want a full in detail analysis, check out whether or not Hurricane Helene, and that's spelled weather just like, weather, not with the H, WETHRER. Whether or not it's on Stella Q's channel on YouTube. They just put the video out today. If not, you can go to my Twitter account, x.com/climateviewer. And I've got it, it's like probably the third tweet down, or just join our damn Telegram chat because it's so much easier to keep up with all that. And it's literally an hour and 44 minutes of him proving every damn thing that happened there and why it happened and explaining it to you, explaining it to Stella like she's a 5-year-old, and he's a meteorologist. And I appreciate it too because I get to learn from it, from Jeff, Go ahead.
What's Stella Q's YouTube? What's her page?
I think it is Stella Q 30. Let me go real quick. I'll grab it real quick. No, not the Biocharisma podcast. It's right there. It is. I can throw this in the chat, can I?
I think so.
Yeah, here. I'll private chat it to you, and then I haven't even looked at the comments because I swear to God I'll get lost very quickly. Yeah, let's not connect the YouTube. You can put that out there. But that's the link to the video itself, and her channel is Stella Q 3306 on YouTube. And I'll drop that in there as well because they've got a lot of they've done several in this series, and the whole purpose of her channel is to educate people to be able to do this yourself. This is a teach a person to fish moment. Give a man a fish for a day. No, we're going to teach you how to be a meteorologist so you can not follow the NPCs and just be addicted to fear porn for the rest of your life. You need to be able to go out there and tell, is it a chemtrail? Is it a contrail? Is it weather or not? Is it intentionally modified or is this natural? And you need to know what to look for in order to be able to tell if it's unnatural. So that's really what we're trying to do here is get people to think more deeply about this topic and go, if we know that planes make contrails in these regions and you videotape one, you track that flight, you look at the radio sign and it's like, there's no way in hell you can make contrails in this condition. Now you've got some secret government shit going on. Now you might actually have some pumps and pipes. But unless you're willing to actually go to that length to verify what you're seeing, I'm full on Edgar Allan Poe. Believe none of what you hear and half of what you see. And that includes me. And my name's Jim Lee. So don't trust me. Literally, like, fucking go do your own homework. Do your research. Do your research.
I'm gonna do that, my man. I got to definitely. I'm gonna check out. I just subbed to Stella. I'm gonna check out the whether or not, because I have friends and family right there, just outside of Asheville and Black Mountain. I have friends that are just north of there in Tennessee, and they did get pummeled. They got flooded out, but it sounded like what I experienced, like in 2010 or 2011 in Costa Rica. We got over 3 days, we got 24 inches of rain, and it washed out all the bridges in my valley. Like, it was a national emergency, and so I've been a part of that type of chaos before with that amount of rain. Like, it was actually like it was maddening. So I'm not in the camp that this was like generated by the hurricane. Plus, when I was tracking the hurricane, Helene, like it was like 50 miles off the coast and it was only a category 1. And I was like, why do they keep predicting a category 4 once it gets onto the land? They all weaken the second that they get over land. So how could they say it needs hot water over distance to generate, to gain intensity? And none of that made any sense to me.
Oh, dude, when you watch this video, like he's literally going to all the METAR stations And these are basically like weather stations that spit out literally like raw data. This is what the military uses, to do all of their predictions. This is what the Federal Aviation Administration issues to all the pilots. So he's literally going to the raw data and looking at it and going, the highest gusts recorded were like 89 miles per hour. Like that was like top end, but the average sustained winds were less than 50 miles per hour, which does not even categorize as a Cat 1. So why in Stella, to her credit, had gone through and compiled a whole bunch of screenshots of all these lamestream media, idiots saying Category 4. This is a Category 4. It's a day of destruction. Why? Because climate change fear porn. They want you to believe that all the hurricanes are getting stronger and that they're becoming more deadly because CO2. So they have an incentive to lie. It's crazy to think that, but even the freaking meteorologists have an incentive to lie. There is not a damn way that Jeff was able to make this video with Stella and show you all the raw data right there on a live stream. What was it live? They did some editing. Because Jeff's slow. I said it, Jeff. I said it. Jeff, but he went through all of the data, and you can go back and gather this exact same information. He's literally showing you the web pages to go to, where to get the information yourself, and you can see they all fucking lied. And then you can go to Kokoraz, which is like this community of people who collect rainfall samples, and you can see the actual numbers of the rainfall, and you can see exactly where it lines up with the Appalachian Mountain. And then on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, there's little to no rainfall. That's due to orographic lift. You can see the conditions before, during, and after the hurricane. From Ram-B slider, which is using the GO-16 cloud differential satellite image. He's using VentuSky and freaking Zoom.earth, and going through it step by step so that any idiot could go back and recreate this and look at it themselves. And as much as I, would love to make a great scary video and gain 100,000 followers overnight and just be super damn popular, I'm not going to lie to people. Like, I think that, these culture vultures and these freaking, tragedy vampires that will literally go out there and make clickbait titles to take advantage of every weather situation, they make it impossible for me to do my damn job. And my job is to protect my children from a world where geoengineering is legal, where unlimited weather modification and weather warfare happens. I want to put a stop to that. So the only way to do that is through being very educated on everything. Now, I'm not a fucking, a meteorologist. Jeff is teaching me to be a half-ass meteorologist. But I, have done all my research on the technologies, what they say they're going to do with them, and, following the trends for the better part of 20 years. And the trends are this. Right now, there are climate clocks around the world put up by Prince, in UK, put up by the Pope in Rome. All these climate clocks are counting down to June 2029. If we don't bend our knee and cut CO2 emissions by June of 2029, their plan is to geoengineer the whole damn planet. Surprise, that's just in time for the grand solar minimum to be at its lowest peak, which is projected to be from 2035 through 2054. So we're going to be in a period where 70% reduction in the magnetic flux of the Earth, of the sun, reduced solar output, which means cooler temperatures already. And then they're going to save us from global warming by deploying a chemical sunscreen in the sky. And then they'll take credit for saving us from global warming. when it was going to cool any damn way. They will screw up the hydrological cycle worldwide, making the northern hemisphere wetter and the southern hemisphere drier. Oh shit, that's already happening. So the only thing necessary to really just spell apocalypse is for these technocrat bastards to get their way, for the public to stay dumb and numb long enough, which unfortunately, I'm a realist, so I hope for the best, but I expect the worst. I do not think that, the Dane Wigingtons of the world and the Into Thin Airs and, the people that are pushing this bullshit fear porn, I don't think they're going to have a come to Jesus moment. I think they're going to keep on doing their thing, and these useful idiots will continue to fear porn their way straight through 2035. Geoengineering probably will become legalized. They'll find a geoengineering governance method circa 2030. They will deploy geoengineering despite my best efforts and the opposition of the solar geoengineering non-use agreement. 100 plus scientists on there, CO2 Coalition, Dr. William Happer, Willie Soon, ETC Group, Pat Mooney, Sylvia Ribeiro, Jim Thomas. These are all groups that are trying to make geoengineering illegal. So it never happens. But it's muddied by so many people focusing on chemtrails and passing laws to ban geoengineering, but they're really talking about planes making clouds. So this is really counterproductive for actual activists that are trying to do something, because I don't want my two daughters, to have kids and grow up in a world where you cannot see the stars. And that is what is projected by all accounts, that by 2050, with the increase in flights per year, by 2050, terrestrial astronomy will be a thing of the past, will be impossible, and we will not be able to see the stars. And if they do manage to pull off legalizing and deploying geoengineering during a grand solar minimum, all it takes is one, maybe two volcanoes. And that tipping scale, we're not talking about runaway global warming. We're talking about runaway global cooling. I mean, that is literally like nuclear freaking winter. When they talked about nuclear winter back in the day, that is exactly what they were warning about. But now we're literally tiptoeing towards nuclear winter with this geoengineering idea. So I do take all of this shit seriously. I'm not trying to just put blame on pollution solely. I'm looking at the totality of everything and saying, if we don't deal with this pollution problem, if we don't call it for what it is and deal with it for what it is, if we don't recognize the agendas of people with this contrail avoidance stuff going on, if we don't recognize and learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it with the CIA. We have to take all of these things and put them in their proper place. Everything in its right place. Radiohead. That's my whole goal, is to figure out where the buckets are and where they go and how to line these buckets up and say, this one goes in this bucket and this one goes in this bucket and this one doesn't go in any bucket, so fuck it. And that's really where I'm at with this thing. Like, I'm very frustrated by people's focus on NextRads controlling the weather and nanobots and Morgellons and all of this other, nonsense. And I'm going to say it's nonsense because, you know what? Fuck it. I am Ninja Cat, okay? And this is all you fools. You think I'm kidding. I am fucking Ninja Cat, okay? And Ninja Cat has the sword of truth. And the sword of truth does not lie. It tells the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. So don't fuck with Ninja Cat. And I got to cut through bullshit all day, every day. And I get email requests to go on these podcasts, and they're like, will you come on here and talk about how Hurricane Helene was controlled, man? And I'm like, no. Why? Because I can't prove it. And I have a reputation. And you know what? Scientists actually email me regularly. Even geoengineers email me regularly. And I have built trust in my community. I built trust in so many people. And I will never throw that away because I have fucking morals. And I'm doing this for my kids. I'm not doing this for any other reason. You think I got to go to work tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock as a security guard while my wife is becoming a nurse, while my kids are being homeschooled. And I'm going to do that because this is not how I make my money. This is something I do because I'm passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
Damn right,
Well,
Ninja Cat. I mean, I didn't. I could have said Ninja Pussy, but you know.
Well, Jim, this has been a blast. I'm going to transcribe a lot of this. I'm going to share you to the community, my community, and I've always appreciated just how exact you are. And like you said, it's obvious that you're not clickbaity and that you're actually doing the real work. And I feel very happy that the majority of my guests actually have rubber that meets the road, like are actually doing things that are making a positive overall benefit to humanity. And you're definitely in that crowd. So thank you so much for what you do. I'll have, when I post the podcast of this, I'll put all of your data in the show notes and all that. Is there anything that you'd like to say goodbye with? Is there anything that you'd like to end with?
Well, somebody told me, a little birdie told me to ask you, is, in your opinion, the Earth flat or round?
I just went through my whole cosmology today on the Owen Benjamin podcast. I think I see things from a metaphysical layer. I don't act, so the way I should say this is like we live in both a physical and metaphysical plane of inertia. So what appearances are experienced as real. That doesn't mean that they are real, because the state that I'm coming from is if it's temporal, by definition, it's not real. So
I can see that point.
that which is eternal is real. So I believe that that we're all having a very subjective experience that we project that other people are sharing with us. And the envelope that we live in, depending on what your projection is what you will experience as real. The objective reality as it is, I can't say.
I
Like,
don't
I
think
don't
anybody
know.
can say that. I mean, it is the Matrix. We are
Right.
bioelectric meat bags trying to make sense of a universe based on our perception and our perspective.
The
And it's
closest
good.
the closest thing I can get to is that we live in God's multipolar hologram. And that, I'm being very specific when I say that. It's God's hologram, so it's not some computer that we live in.
Yeah.
Hologram, if anybody, when you understand the physics of holograms, it will blow your freaking mind, because you can take any aspect of the plate that the hologram is being projected from, and it has the entire hologram within it. So therefore, a hologram is a three-dimensional depiction of a two-dimensional fractal. And that's how I think we experience consciousness.
It's
I think
interesting that you put it that way, because I interviewed Raytheon at the Weather Modification Conference at the AMS annual meeting, and they actually had an augmented reality hologram that I could walk around, and it was completely three-dimensional. I could literally reach out and touch the clouds and move the clouds with my hands. And I literally looked at the dude and I was like, now can we control the weather? And he's like, hell yeah, we can. And we just started, and I've got these goggles on with this heads up display. And I'm like, what's crazy is, like, how close is that to our actual reality? Because the
it's very
secret,
close.
because the intentions we put out
Yeah.
are, determine the reality that we end up having. So there's a lot to contemplate there in what you just said. And
Yeah,
I like the way that don't you don't nail yourself down to a stupid binary and check a box.
yeah,
Because the question in and of itself, I believe, is the trap.
it
Um,
is. It is. Because the people that I really respect, and I noticed a huge leap in my own consciousness when I did this. I'm an apophatic learner. I'm a reductionist. So, like, you only have certain data sets when you're making, and I have my own personal experience. So I can say what I have not experienced relative to what somebody is telling me about something. But
mhm.
I'm not declarative. I'm a creditor. So creditors win because all they do is ask questions. They never make the
It's
they
funny that you put it that way. That's exactly what I did when I went into a flat earth room. I said, "Look, I come from the standpoint that I don't have either side figured out and that I will never just like with the chemtrail contrail thing.
Mhm,
I'm 90% contrails. I will
mhm,
never be 100% anything because once you decide that you 100% know something, you're leaving out the possibility that you're wrong. And the day
mhm,
we all agree is the day we could all be wrong. So you always have to have this curiosity, which is why on my latest two videos I did on YouTube, Dominic, who was in here earlier, Storm Fury 101, he created a info like an overlay for my YouTube channel, my
mhm,
webcam, and he had put up at the top Jim Lee, investigative researcher. And I was like,
mm,
now how about make that not an expert? And it
right.
comes from the saying, always a student, sometimes a teacher, never an expert. And if you approach that view of life for the rest of your life, then you'll always be willing to learn something new, to be able to accept when you're wrong, to sometimes teach, but recognize that you don't have it all figured out. And I think that that's a great way to view anything that you're, researching. If you're going to be an autodidact, um, you what was the apo word you used? Apo what?
Apophatic.
Apophatic. And then the opposite of that is apophenia, where apophenia is a psychological condition where people connect all the dots. Like we have this innate, built built-in um, pattern seeking thing. So we want to connect dots, and people who suffer from apophenia, they connect dots that should not be connected till they
Mhm,
finally build this entire world where they've now constructed their own matrix of lies that they believe as fundamental truths. And whenever they're presented with new information, if it doesn't fit into their worldview, they completely discard it.
mhm,
Or if it reinforces their worldview, no matter how crazy it may sound, guess what? I'm connecting that dot too. So I think that there's got to be some balance. And, the older I get, the less I know, the more I learn, the more questions I have. So
right.
like I'm with you on that. And that's why I tell everybody, I think I've got this pretty figured out. But at the same time, check the references, go to the website, read it yourself. Go to every website, go do your homework your way and you'll figure it out yourself. And if you find out that I'm wrong, if you're confident that I'm wrong, Jim at climateviewer.com or go to my website connect.climateviewer.com, which has all my social medias. I'm only on X, by the way. So if you click any of those, they're all going to say go to X. But it's got my phone number, my address is on my website. Like reach out and touch somebody. Like let me know, bro, you're wrong, and this is why. And I will consider it because there have been many times where I've literally had to go and delete articles, edit things that I'd said 100 times because I was presented with new evidence. So please, I encourage anybody out there to do that. And also, um, to anybody, I've already shared this on my socials and everything like that everywhere I could. But I'm going to put this up on my Substack also. And that's going to
Great.
go out to another 3,000 people via email. To anybody who watches this and you made it this far to the end, you're one of those special people that's curious. I encourage you to share Topher stuff. Go topherhq.com, the Biocharisma podcast. Come check out my stuff. Go also check out Stella Q stuff. And if you're really curious, come join us in the Telegram chat, because we're in there like every day just arguing about silly shit. And that's where the fun's at.
Awesome. Jim, this has been a blast. Let's not wait too long till we have our next talk, okay, my friend?
Yeah, it has been a minute. It has been far too long since I get to hang out with my bromance.
Awesome.
A lot of people were really excited when I said I was going on with you, and I'm like, yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we were able to do this, man.
Well, you have a good night, my friend. And to all of you guys out there, thank you for watching. And hit us up on all of our different spots that you hit us up on, and give us some feedback. And I look forward to the next time we get to rap, man.
Yeah, and definitely show some algorithm love. Even if you just write booty juice or fairy dust in the comments. Like, just leave a comment, hit that like button, share, subscribe, do the usual things. Support Topher. He's a hell of a fella, and he deserves it.
Awesome. All right. Good night, everybody.